What's up, guys? Music fan here. How you guys doing? Haven't been here in quite a while. So with the time that I have now, let's continue the Metallica discography review. While we still can, I'm still able to, and we're gonna continue with 1996 Load album, released 4 years after the Black Album. No, correction, 5 years after the release of the Black Album, 1991. So yeah, so in 1996, when Metallica releases Load, the first album after their commercially successful Black Album, which really made them household names. It really made them very famous and very internationally known for the very first time, as opposed to just being strictly the metal underground. And yeah, this really solidifies Metallica as being a very household name, and not the little precious thrash metal band that people, especially in the '80s, kind of like held them in. Um, and yeah, it's a much different take on Metallica this time around. So here you have a band that becomes successful for the very first time with the Black Album. Of course, you know the singles, Enter Sandman, Whenever I May Roam, Sad But True, The Unforgiven. Those hit singles, you had those. And with a band like having this almost endless touring cycle for the next 4 years, until before you know it, it's 1995, 1996. So now you kind of come into this question of, okay, it's been years since we last released an album. What do we do now? Do we try and return to the complex, ultra complexity, ultra progressive sound of the Justice album? Or do we try to repeat what we did on the Black Album? They eventually ended up deciding we're not going to do either of those. What we're going to do instead is that we're going to try and do a bit of a makeover and put makeup and put eyeliner on our eyebrows, and we're going to sing country-esque songs, even though they're not really country-esque, but they're more of a blues type of metal, and put that out as an album of 14 songs. Each song very slow than the last. Woo. Anyway, I'm just getting ahead. But yeah, Load is a completely different story. With the Load album, you completely get a new Metallica this time around. Like, gone are the ultra complex riffing, the fast drum playing, the lyrics about environmental destruction, about death. Those are all gone in the past now. Here now, you get these very slow, grooving songs, these really slow, blues influenced songs, slightly country-esque but not really country, and you get very personal themed lyrics than you have had in the past. And you know, honestly, that kind of comes in very mixed results with this album. The sound of this album is really kind of very slow. There's a lot of slow riffing on here. There's still plenty of fast playing on here. There's like for example, the first song, "Ate My Beep." I'm not gonna bother singing the words. Sorry, guys. But with the first song on this album, you know, like you do get a bit of a good kick in. You know, there's a really kind of a good kick in kind of song, a start of an album. And 2x4 also is another good song. You know, like they kind of trade away the complexity and kind of embrace more of a, like, it's not so much dance orientated, but kind of more that has a bit of a loose groove type of feel, not in the sense of a disco thing, but more of like more places. They place more emphasis on rhythm than complexity with this album, and those first two songs are kind of clearly examples of that. But in other songs, you kind of get like 7 or 8 minutes long of like slow build up, slow pacing, and very slow riffing. And while I'm not that type of fan that kind of thinks that, oh, 80s Metallica was better, all the rest of the stuff sucks, it's like I'm not technically arguing from that ground particularly, but at the same time too is because they try to be loosened up, to kind of ease themselves musically, then some of the songs here, like especially 8 minutes long, maybe even some of them 9 or 10 minutes long. I think, is there a song 10 minutes long? I know the Outlaw Torn originally was 10 minutes long, and they had to cut it down for time. But yeah, some of these songs are very laborious for me to get through, and that's part of the reason why it took me so long to get to this album review was that 14 songs, like really really long album, stretching almost like 78 minutes long, and I sincerely tried to listen to this album all the way through, but it just became so laborious and so much like a chore for me to listen to that I couldn't listen to all of it. I couldn't listen to all the songs. But anyway, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. The songwriting, as I said before, is different. It's definitely more personal, more not as political or not as imaginary layered than in past Metallica works. And one example is the song "Mama Said," which is written by James Hetfield, recounts his mother's death as been a recurring theme in Metallica's music, and but it's a really good song. It's a personal favorite of mine, one of my personal favorites from this album. Like 3 other songs that are personal favorites of mine from this album has to be "Until It Sleeps," "Hero of the Day," and "King Nothing." All 3 of these songs are examples of when Metallica's musical looseness, their musical fluidness on this album really works to a degree, to an extent, and I definitely really like these songs. Hero of the Day, especially considering that is one of Kirk Hammett's most emotive solos ever put to tape, and King Nothing, having this really menacing, this really gnarly feel to it, like it's just very gritty, and I think that's awesome for this song. And also Until It Sleeps, because it has a very few examples of Jason Newstead's bass playing in the beginning, and again also recounts James Hetfield's mother's death, and as far as my least favorite song on here, it's kind of hard to say because, again, like I said before, I sincerely tried to listen to this album all the way through at least once. Really couldn't do that because it was just so laborious for me to go through. So for now, that least favorite song of mine is kind of a bit of a question mark for now because I couldn't really pick anyone. I'm not going to do a track by track review here because since there's so many songs off this album, a special mention though I have to say is the song "Bleeding Me." Everyone has said that song was really awesome, is really phenomenal, and I haven't familiarized myself with that song too much to kind of draw a verdict from my own perspective to see if it's a great song for at least for me or not. But by all accounts, it's a pretty good song. It's one of the ones that kind of permeates through this looseness to the point that it becomes a laborious thing that is prevalent with this album. So I'm gonna leave a track by track review down in the list below, the description box. So with skipping that for now, go to the 4-point grading system. You guys know what this is by now. Music originality, songwriting, likability, and the package, the record as a whole. So with music originality, it's kind of a tough one for music originality because, I mean, it is original in the sense that Metallica, they try to do something different. They try to loosen themselves up with this album, but it really comes in very mixed results and in a very mixed bag. And they try to be ambitious, but I guess in a way the record or the originality at times kind of suffers under the weight of that ambition. So I guess it kind of gets like a halfway 3 out of 5 for the originality. The songwriting kind of is also kind of a similar thing too. They really try to do something different with this album, songwriting wise, but it doesn't end up really holding much water for the lyrics, particularly. And sometimes the slow music at times kind of overtakes the lyrics at certain points. But yeah, the lyrics, times where the personal lyrics do work, like on Mama Said and Until It Sleeps, really are great. But on other points, there are points where the music kind of outweighs the songwriting and it suffers as a result. So, kind of gets a decent, again, same thing as music originality, 3 out of 5. Likability is really super tough for me because I want to listen to this album. There were times that I had to kind of like force myself to try to listen to this album, and like every single song. But for the likes of me, it just doesn't happen that way. Like because the band tried to stuff so much songs and tried to extend the time length and to try to experiment more with the groove textures, the extended song textures. There are times where it becomes so laborious to the point that I end up thinking that, wow, I can't really. It is a chore. It was a chore for me to kind of try and listen to this album. But the singles that do eventually work, and even some non-singles like Bleeding Me and Mama Said, for instance, or even It Might Be or 2x4, for instance, is like there are times where it really works. But for the most part, because there's so many songs, it's hard to like this album. It really is. So likability kind of gets a very same thing, like a 3 out of 5 is kind of halfway. I do listen to this album sometimes, but not really much. And as for Load, as a package, I'm really on the fence for this because, I really want to like this album. This is a departure point for Metallica. This is a point where they try to reinvent themselves, change it up, shake up the core, for instance. But they try so hard to the point that their ambition, like I said before, the songs kind of falter because of that ambition, and there are some songs where this loosening up really works, but then there are most of the other songs, they just don't hold any water for me, and they're so long and so slow and so to the point that it just becomes so laborious and monotonous for me to listen to, and again, I'm not arguing from the standpoint of saying, oh, 80s Metallica was better, this stuff sucks. I'm not arguing from that point of view, because there are good songs in this album that works. But as a package, it's one of those albums that kind of seem like, some songs that are great, and then the rest of the songs just kind of seem like, not filler, but they kind of seem like, as ways to kind of fill up the disc. I think, in fact, I even found out that originally this was supposed to be a double album, or a concept of a double album, with Load on one side and then Reload on the other. But time constrictions and disc restraints couldn't do that, so they had to settle with the single disc approach. But as far as Load is concerned, it's again a halfway kind of thing, like 3 out of 5 for this record. 3 out of 5. It's definitely not my favorite Metallica album ever. However, and I see a big however with big capital letters, despite all my problems with this album, I would much rather listen to this album than say Saint Anger. I would much rather engorge myself with the sound of this album than Saint Anger, because Saint Anger is a different story altogether. But that's for that album review. But yeah, I would rather match listen to this album than Saint Anger. But that's, again, that album review. But that's just that's it. My thoughts on the Load album. 3 out of 5. Kind of halfway, midway point to the album. So yeah, that's been Load. Leave your comments in the comment section, side, below, diagonal, however you're watching this. Do you love this album? Do you hate it? Why? And of course, rate, comment, and subscribe if you like my reviews. And if you like the channel, we are going to be doing Reload next, hopefully soon. And hopefully it won't take me another month to do this. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Metallica, Load, 6th album review, and yeah, pretty much it. Mr. Music Fan, take care, guys.